Do you have a real job? I mean, I don't, but I know a little something about writing and time management. Someone who isn't a writer told me a while ago that you practically have to be a millionaire or retired to have the time to write a novel, which I found extremely confusing because I'm neither of those things yet. By the way, if you're wondering who I am or how you ended up here, hi, I'm Katri. I could talk about writing all day, every day, but if you subscribe to Protagonist Crafts, you don't need to listen to me here talk about writing more than about once a week. And why am I crocheting while I'm talking to you about writing? Because I've got ADHD and I'm fidgety AF, and if I don't have something in my hands, I will just keep doing this, which looks very weird on camera. I don't know how to gesture like normal people. Maybe I need to go to Italy to learn to talk with my hands. Also, I don't like making intense eye contact with the camera. So, yes, can you tell that I'm not neurotypical? It's very, very secret. Nobody can tell. So yeah, for full transparency, no, I don't have a job outside home. I work full time for Protagonist Crafts, but I don't have to waste time on like commuting. I don't need to spend time hanging out with my coworkers after hours. So I don't know what people do when they have jobs. But I do still have like a life full of responsibilities. I work fairly long hours because I love working on Protagonist Crafts, but also I have 2 children. I have 3 cats. I do volunteer work for Red Cross. So like I have a life full of responsibilities and full of stuff. So yeah, it would be nice. It would be very nice if I could just dedicate all my time to writing, but that just isn't in the cards for me right now. So what I can do instead is use the time that I have and then give you my best tips for achieving what you want. So can you actually write novels if you have a full-time job that doesn't allow you to write on company's dime? Yes, actually most writers these days have to do that. It's not like all Jane Austen. Well, actually nobody is Jane Austen these days. So like, yes, you have stuff to do, but most writers, even professional writers, also have their day jobs and, things to do. So don't let that be an obstacle. And I've talked about this in a different video called 12-ish things that you need to stop doing if you want to write a novel. But you can't like let your ego be like, oh, well, I can't work on my writing for 8 hours every day, therefore it's useless. No, use the time that you have. And so what if you make slow progress? That is still progress. But also, if you want to write a novel and you have like a full life full of stuff, then you are going to have to make some kind of sacrifices. So take an inventory of your time, how you're using it currently, and think of what are non-negotiables that you need to spend time on every day or every week? And what are things that are actually not non-negotiable? What are things that you could actually do without? So do you really need to watch that show on Netflix? Do you really need an hour-long bath? Or maybe 45 minutes could suffice. Maybe a 5-minute shower. I know, if I have a 5-minute shower, you know that I'm either dying or like I need to be somewhere in 30 minutes. But you do need to sacrifice something. And maybe you don't want to sacrifice anything. But then do you actually want to write? If you want to write, then you have to want to write. But it's going to take something out of you. Writing a novel, it's no walk in the park. So what could you actually not spend so much time on so that you could have more time for your writing? So I have this wonderfully prolific writer friend who has 2 children, and she likes dictating herself, like her stories, like she's doing chores and stuff, and then she's like dictating on her phone. And then later, when the children are asleep, she just goes and writes, what she has written before. So that could be something that you could try. Personally, I love writing by hand. I actually use my many notebooks that I have. So that could be something you do. You don't need to be like at a desk, at your very tidy typing desk, to be able to write your novel, work on your novel. So use the tools and methods that actually work for you and that are easy to access and easy to bring with you. And imagine that you only have like this little pocket of time every day or few times a week where you can write. Imagine that you sit down to write, okay? And then you're like, oh yeah, what was I writing? Oh yes, well, I had this idea. Well, I'm just going to try there and write this. And then you read it later and like, oh no, why are they going there? They were supposed to do something completely different. what's happening here? Why did I do that? Now I need to delete everything. I've just lost 2 weeks worth of work. So how could you possibly avoid that? Well, have an outline. My first published novel, I wrote it when my eldest was a baby. I remember when the book came out, people were asking me like, how did you have the time to write? But like having time to write has never been like something that I even oh no, I made a mistake here. It has never been anything that I even like think about. I just write. So I wrote with my baby on my arms. I wrote in the hospital. And not like because it's like hustle culture or you need to hustle, you need to work everywhere, but because I wanted to. It made me. Writing makes me me. So like I did that, but I didn't have an outline. I didn't have like a clear idea of what I was writing. And it took me like almost a year to write my novel, or the first draft. It took me almost a year to write the first draft. And even then, it was like 100 handwritten pages. And I can't remember exactly how many words it was, but it was like nowhere near a full novel manuscript, maybe like 30,000 words. I don't know. But then the next novel that I'm currently querying, it hasn't been published yet, but it took me 3 months to write the first draft. And at this point, like when I was writing the previous novel, I had one baby. She was the easiest baby in the world. She was a great sleeper and just like didn't require a lot from me. So it was easy. But when I was working on my next novel, I had 2 children at that point. The angriest baby in the world. She needed to be like rocked constantly, and she's still not the most easygoing and relaxed person in the world. I love her to death. She's like me, but little. But yeah, I wrote that first draft in 3 months, and it was spanned over multiple notebooks, and it was closer to like I think 60 or 70,000 words. So what changed there? I learned how to outline my story, and yes, it took me a month to write the outline, but 1 month of outlining and then 3 months of writing the first draft, ending up in like 60,000 words, 70,000 words versus spending 9 months, 10 months, something like that, on a very, very skinny first draft. I think you might agree that it was time well spent. So having an outline, it helps you use your time more efficiently. It also makes the editing process easier, because if nobody has told you this, but writing a novel, the whole process, a huge chunk of it goes to editing. So like writing the first draft, that's just a blip in the whole thing. And then editing is like the bulk of the work. So you want to make that as easy as it can be. So if you don't need to do these like huge adjustments to your plot because you've planned your story beforehand, then that is going to massively help. And I know there are people there who are going to resist having an outline. But again, I think just like if you have a full-time job and you can work on your novel only in these like smaller pieces, and having some kind of a plan that keeps you on track, it's going to massively help. And you won't end up wasting time on thinking when you should already be writing. And if you think the outlining is not going to work for you, maybe you just haven't found the right method. So you need to check out my genius plotting system and find the method that actually works for you. And you're going to get my best tool for actually figuring out what happens in your story. And yeah, when you're short on time and you're excited about a story idea, it can feel tempting to just start writing. But it's a recipe for loads of these detours that you might need to edit out later, and just like staring at the screen because, well, you had this idea and you were really excited to start, but you don't know where it's going. And I don't want you to get discouraged or think that you're a bad writer because you can't just like pull all this stuff out of your head every time you sit down to write. So having a plan, it's absolutely worth it to spend some time on it. And again, use a method that you know it's going to work for you. It's completely worthless if you create an outline and then it's like, maybe you've got this fancy Notion dashboard. Like I've created Notion dashboards for writers. You can find them in my Etsy shop. But if it's not something that's going to work for you, if it's not something that you're actually going to look at and use, then that is useless. And an outline doesn't have to be like this summary of your story. It can be bullet points, it could be pictures, it could be just completely random things, but it's just a representation of how your brain works. So think of how your brain works, think of what would work for you, and then use that to create your outline. And you don't need to just plan your story, but you also need to plan when you're going to write. So if you have like a day job, then I assume that you know like when you're going to work. Obviously, there are different types of jobs, and sometimes you might be on call, or maybe you're like a substitute something. But generally, think of when are you going to write, and make those decisions beforehand. So you don't need to be like, oh, am I going to write? Am I going to go for a run instead? Making decisions, it's tiring for your brain, and your brain doesn't want to make decisions. It wants to do things the same way all the time. So make the decisions beforehand and then stick to them. Be strict with yourself. If you want to write a novel, then sometimes you have to be like the bad guy to yourself. You're like, okay, we decided we're going to do this, so we are going to do this. Okay. And you can't plan for everything. Like, you don't know if you're going to be stuck in traffic for half an hour and then you're going to be home late and you won't have the time to write. But, maybe you can think about your story in traffic. And like, you don't necessarily know when your baby is going to fall asleep. So just think about those unpredictable times. So if you can't write when you were planning to write, when could you write? But also make a commitment to use surprising free time as well. So maybe suddenly, maybe your baby felt, I don't know why I keep talking. Well, I know why I keep talking about babies. I've had two, but, maybe you get off work, half an hour earlier for some reason. Use that time on writing. And then think of those more predictable times. So could you maybe work on your writing for 15 minutes every night before you go to bed? 15 minutes, it's generally not going to make or break, your sleep schedule. So could you dedicate 15 minutes every night to writing? Could you maybe take a faster shower? Could you order takeout instead of cooking dinner? So again, I'm not saying that you need to do any of those things specifically, but think of your own life and think of where could you add more writing? What could you maybe take away at least sometimes to add some more writing? So when you've made your plans and, made your decisions, stick to them. Okay. Again, be strict with yourself. But if you live with other people, if you've never dedicated time to writing and then suddenly you're like, okay, I'm writing a novel, it can be surprising, for the people you live with, that suddenly you're locking yourself up in your bedroom and writing a novel. Huh? What's up with that? But just say, okay, I've decided I'm going to write a novel. I've been thinking about it. I want to be a writer. I want to write this novel. And this is mommy's writing time. So go play with your brother. Go play with Lego. I'm going to write now. And, tell your roommates or tell your spouse that I'm going to write now. Please don't come in and tell me about what you saw at the grocery store. Tell me later. This is my writing time. Please respect that. And yes, there are people out there on the internet who think thinking about writing, it counts. It makes you a writer. It doesn't. Thinking about writing makes you a thinker. It doesn't make you a writer. But when you've got a full-time job and stuff to do, then it's very helpful. It might save you time that you think about your story when you can't write it. So maybe when you're driving, maybe when you're waiting for something, if you're doing something very boring and repetitive at work, you could think about your story and not just think about it like, oh yeah, it's very nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or dreaming up steam scenes in your romance novel. But if you got problems in your story, then try to solve those problems outside your writing time. So how could this person end up at the market at the same time with this other person? So think about that stuff and solve problems and come up with interesting plot events when you're not writing. And yes, that might be a very obvious tip, but I'm just saying, commit to thinking about writing when you can, and not just generally thinking about it, yeah, but solving those problems and coming up with different solutions. And you can also think about what you're going to work on when you sit down to write. So when you think of okay, I'm going to write this in this scene, and I wonder what should happen there. Who's going to be there? What kind of details I will include? So that's also going to save you time. And I've got a great blog post with these plot questions that you can ask yourself. So I'm going to add it in the description. So you can read the questions and then maybe think about them when you're not writing, when you're driving, when you're in the shower, etc. And if you're working from home, you're already on your computer all day, it might not seem very exciting, very tempting to stay on the same computer and then write your novel, and your butt is going to go numb, your posture is going to be terrible, your eyes will turn into screens, stuff that happens when you're on computer all day. So I understand that it might not feel very comfortable, but if you do want to write your novel, then you could try writing somewhere else. Maybe you could go to the library or to a friend's place. Maybe you get a friend who also writes. You could write together. You could go, hang out on their sofa and write your novel there. Or in the very least, you could write in a different room. You could you could work at like your prop desk. And then you go to the living room or to the kitchen to write your novel. So it could be make it a different environment, so it doesn't feel like, oh, I've been at work for 8 hours and now I need to stay in the same environment and keep working on my novel. It feels like I've been at work for 16 hours. So a change of scenery, that could be nice. I work on my business at home, and it just can be annoying when your workplace is the place where people leave their dirty dishes and where there are socks everywhere. Why are there so many socks? So yes, it's not necessarily conducive to your novel writing. So think of what can make your environment better for your creativity, for your creative process, and for your writing. What kind of adjustments could you make? And yes, maybe you could become one of those people who writes at a coffee shop. And yeah, it won't get cheap if you go to Starbucks every day and you get your a $9 latte or whatever. We don't have Starbucks here, so I've only ever been to Starbucks on holiday. But, we have coffee shops anyway, and a girl can dream. But, you could go to the library, like I mentioned. You could go to a friend's house, maybe. If it's summer, or if you live somewhere where, seasons are not a real thing, you could write outside. So think of what kind of variety could you add to your environment that could make writing a novel not feel like you're still working. But what if you're a student? What if you're studying full time? And some of this is it's a bit different when you're a student, because you're not just studying when you're at school. You have assignments to make. You need to study for exams. So it can all become this one big thing. And I just want you to know that you're not in a hurry to write a novel. If you're a young person and you want to write, then I would recommend that maybe you write shorter stories when you got the time and energy, and you read books and you learn about writing. You shouldn't be in any hurry to write a novel. So don't feel pressured to do it, because you're going to fry your brain if you're just reading and writing and reading and writing and reading and writing all the time. But if you want to write a novel, even though you're a full-time student, some of these tips that I just gave earlier are applicable. So if you're studying in one place, maybe you can work on your novel in a different place. Maybe, if you go home, if your studying place is different, than your home, maybe you could only write your novel when you're at home. Maybe you could have specific music for writing your novel so that your brain realizes okay, it's not studying time, this is writing time, this is different. Maybe you could use just your fanciest notebooks for writing your novel and for planning your novel. Things like that, think, how can you make it not feel like studying? And romanticizing everything, it can be a fun way to make writing a novel feel not like work and not like studying. So how can you make it fun? How can you make it aesthetic? And again, that stuff, it isn't necessary to writing, but what we're thinking of here is how can we make it not feel like work, so that your brain doesn't think that you've been working, you've been studying 24/7. So if writing feels more fun and more doable when you got your fanciest writing clothes on, and you've got a nice drink in hand and you've lit a candle, then do it. Just do it. Just because it doesn't have to be that way, it doesn't mean that it can't be that way. And something very important to remember here is that writing is not a speed race. So don't discount like any time that you do have. Don't give in to the drama of thinking that you can't write a novel because you can only work on it like 15 minutes a day. Then make progress 15 minutes per day. That is still better than none. And again, this is something I talk about in a different video, but just like it doesn't have to be fast. Who says that you need a certain time frame to write your novel? Who is saying this? Your readers are not going to care how fast you wrote your novel. They're not going to be impressed how quick you were. They care about your story. They care about the quality of your story. And if currently you're in a kind of stage in your life where you can't dedicate a lot of time to writing every day, then that is fine. Just accept that and use the time that you can. It's not a speed race. You're not any worse of a writer if you do it slowly. And my last tip is don't edit blindly. And again, this is something that I've talked about before, but it's like if you approach editing as like, okay, I've written this thing, I'm starting again from page 1, I'm reading every single page, I'm just fixing everything I see there, and then I'm going to start over. No, do not do that. Okay, edit in stages. First of all, start from big and move on to small. So make big picture changes first and then move on to smaller things, but also have a focus for each draft. So maybe first, you're working on your plot. Maybe you left a lot of placeholders for yourself during when you were writing the first draft. So maybe you fill in those. You finally know how to write the heist scene, or what kind of a romantic love scene you're going to write. So, filling any blanks that you might have, put everything in the right order, and then think of like, are you going to work on your characters now or dialogue? So that is going to make the whole editing process a lot less overwhelming. But also, it's going to make sense and it's going to produce a lot better writing than if you were just doing it blindly. So again, you need a plan and you need to know exactly what you're going to do every time you sit down to write. So yeah, those were my tips for writing a novel, even when you're working or studying full time. And I just want you to know that you've got this. Like, I wouldn't be making this video. I wouldn't have written the original blog post if I didn't think that it was possible to write a novel while working full time. And it's not just like my personal opinion. There are loads of people out there in the world who have full-time jobs, who are writing novels. And I'm not going to say that you can do it because they can do it. I can do it, therefore you can do it. But like, you can do it because you can do it. And I believe in you, and I will see you in another video.